Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another SwansCast podcast. This week, I'm joined by Ben. It's been a couple of episodes since you were last on, but welcome back, Ben.
Yeah, always glad to be here. Thank you.
I know it's been a busy time for you in university and probably a couple of busy weeks ahead as you come into the end, but how's things going?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Done in on June the 7th and then graduated into the world as a proper adult, which feels weird, but yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah, so, and again, another apology for the inconsistent and lack of content. I'm literally in the middle of packing for a house move, which I've mentioned previously, but still in the middle of it. So hopefully in the next few weeks that will be all over with. To be honest, it's dragging on, and I'm sure anyone that's gone through moving house knows what it's like. But yeah, very, very time consuming. And Lee is away today because of anyone who works in finance probably know, but month end has happened again. So he's kind of tied up doing bits of work as we speak. Unfortunately, working to the evening. Probably more than he wants to. I'm sure he would prefer to come and chat about football, but he's not here, so we'll get stuck in. And coming towards the end of the season, sometimes there's not an awful lot of things to talk about, but we've got a couple of points. We've got an upturn in form, maybe not as dramatic and drastic and as important as what we saw last year, but nonetheless, an upturn in form towards the end of the season once again seems to be something that we kind of doing a bit lately, a few times. We've also got a couple of good scenarios to discuss across the league for the last game week. I guess there's three areas, isn't there? So you've got the second automatic promotion spot that's still technically not wrapped up. The playoffs are still technically not wrapped up, and also the relegation spots. I think basically there's two available, but really there's only one due to a massive swing of goal difference, unfortunately for Huddersfield, which we didn't necessarily help him out and do him a favour in that department, but probably not going to complain about that if you're a Swans fan. So, and then obviously the big news as well that's recently dropped, which we will discuss a little bit. Obviously, we're not experts, but we'll chat a little bit about what we think about I think it was yesterday they announced it, the finances that were obviously announced by the club, and massive losses. Really, there's no way to kind of make it sound better. It is what it is on the paper, and it's 3 years in a row at least that they've announced losses. So we'll get into that later on after we've talked all the football. So let's start at Huddersfield then. I know you managed to watch the entire game. In the middle of a better run of form for us, really. So four games without a loss now, 3 wins and a draw. So what did you make of first of all, what did you make of the upturn in form, and specifically what you saw from the Huddersfield game?
Oh, I think an upturn in form was probably due. I'm not sure anyone really expected us to have 3 wins in a row without conceding a goal, though. I think one thing that has become clear over the last 10 games or so, the number of chances we've conceded from open play has dropped significantly, and that's transferred over into open play goals conceded. Vast majority of the goals have been conceded have been from set pieces, which could still use some work. But it's nice to see over the last 3-4 games or so, Stoke, Rotherham, Huddersfield, and I know Norwich we conceded 2, but we have looked a lot more solid at the back. Cabango and Darling look at a form of formidable partnership when Wood was out injured. Huddersfield, it was a strange game, really, on paper. You see 4-0, think, oh, it must have been one-way traffic for 90 minutes. And it's not really that Huddersfield did a great deal in the game, but at half-time, it was 0-0, of course. It was 0-0 up until the 70th minute, in fact. And it didn't look like a 4-0 game at that point in time whatsoever. I'd say we probably deserved to be winning at halftime, maybe by a goal, heading towards the 70th minute. We thought, okay, it's going to be another one of those games where it's a substandard opposition, but we can't break them down. And then Jamal Lowe, individual bit of brilliance, done the left wing to open up the score and make it 1-0. And the goals just sort of flew in after that. Huddersfield sort of crumbled. It was the game, as you said, which really, it was near enough the final nail in the coffin for them. Relegation-wise, it set up a big encounter against Birmingham, which they couldn't get over the line in. To be honest, I mean, 4-0, like I said, flatters us a little bit, but nice to see a couple of people on the score sheet. Liam Walsh in particular, brilliant long-range effort.
Yeah,
it's probably set up a lot of end-of-season optimism. Feels like this happens every year where we're not really in a promotion battle, then we do well in the run-in, and then it's a sort of what-if moment. It's about can we continue that into next season now, I suppose.
Yeah, obviously it happened last year, but the manager change kind of nipped that in the bud. Hopefully, we won't have that same situation arise this summer. So it does perhaps open up an interesting opportunity going into next season. But we've got plenty of time to discuss that all summer, I think, in the off season. But looking at this game specifically, I think you are right. Obviously, for this one, Huddersfield, as much as they had a few games left after this to play, like this one, they really needed to get something out of. Because if they'd even got a point, they wouldn't find themselves in the situation they find themselves now, where even though they're not relegated, they pretty much are because of their really bad goal difference. So they could technically win against Ipswich on the weekend. We'll discuss this a bit more later on, but that will raise them to the same points that currently Plymouth sit on. So obviously it depends on how they get on in the last game. But the goal difference swing is something ridiculous, like
16.
what's Plymouth's in comparison?
So Plymouth are on -12, Huddersfield are on -27. So there'd need to be a 16-goal swing in both games on the final day. So Huddersfield would have to win by 9 goals. Plymouth would have to lose by 8 or 7 or something. It depends on the head-to-head. But point being, that's not happening. If we're being entirely honest, that's just not going to happen.
But they, like you said, it was 0-0 for a long time in this game. And had they managed to keep that as a result, then they would have had that opportunity if Plymouth didn't win their last game to sneak ahead. But I mean, not necessarily the opposition you want to be trying to get a last gasp win against Ipswich, is it? But regardless, I think that's when we look at the 4-0 result, and you said it didn't look like a 4-0 game, I think that is the reason. Obviously, they were trying to hang on, maybe trying to do a smash and grab. Speaking to the Huddersfield fan I spoke to before the game, he wasn't confident. He didn't think their goal scoring threat was good enough. He didn't think that they were going to cause us any trouble, and he kind of resigned to the fact that they were already going to lose that game. Whereas I was a bit more cautious because I thought they would have so much more to play for and to come out and fight against. And I guess for 70 minutes, like, they were in the game, weren't they? And ultimately, I think when that goal went in, they just kind of, maybe the realization of the reality set in a little bit.
I mean, at 1-0, sorry to interrupt. At 1-0, they hit the post. There was a good chance, really should have been hitting the target, to be honest. I forget who took the shot. And that could have been the moment that it flipped. But other than that, they really didn't threaten much at all. They weren't really in our box for 90 minutes. And as you said, they had a lot to play for. But let's say you played that game for a neutral and knew nothing about either team. You would have assumed it was a dead rubber. You would have had no idea that Huddersfield were fighting for their life. You really wouldn't have.
Yeah, well, that's what he was telling me in the pre-match, was that they didn't really have the fight in them, and you weren't seeing it. They just haven't got the firepower up front. So perhaps we did see that on the pitch. Maybe I was harsh saying that 1-0 they capitulated. Probably more when Ronald scored the second, I think, is probably where they were just a bit like, well, that's game over, because basically we scored first goal to go 1-0 up, 73rd minute. Second was in the 85th. And then we scored 2 90-plus minute goals, pretty sharp after each other. And like you said, it was nice to see a couple of people on the score sheet. So Jamal Lowe with his first goal, an individual effort. He's got a couple of them this season and a couple lately, actually. And I've given him a lot of stick this season mainly because the stuff that he's shown, for example, in this goal, I think has just not been there as often as it should have been this season. But coming towards the end of the season, whether it's because he thinks he's got a point to prove, or he's working hard to get back into the team because he's kind of on the bench often, and coming off the bench, he's trying to make a point all the time when he's working hard for the manager that way. Whatever the reason is, seems to be working, because we are getting more of that. But earlier this season, when he was getting his goals a lot from penalties, that bumped his numbers up. I didn't think he was that impressive, to be honest. And I think he's ended the season a lot more akin to what I would expect from him, with some of these moments of magic that he has been producing with some of his individual goals.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tip my hat off to him, really, because I think if you look back across the entire season, his goals, as you said, some of them were pens. I do count 3 goals now, 1 against Ipswich, 1 against Cardiff, and 1 against Huddersfield. 3 of them are just, he receives the ball down the left wing, goes on a run, cuts inside, shoots, scores.
He did it for the last game he played under Russell Martin as well. I can't remember the opposition. It might have been Stoke. Did the same thing.
Was it Russell Martin? I didn't think he...
When he got sold when Russell Martin came in, didn't he, pretty much straight away?
Yeah.
He played like one game at the start of the season.
But yeah, point being, I think he's displayed, he has got an individual brilliance in him. I think he's one of a handful of players that since Luke Williams has come in, they've seen a noticeable step up in his ability. not that he's started very frequently, mind. If you look in the last 4 games, he hasn't started a game. I think under Luke Williams altogether, there's only a couple of starts I see in there. Whether he comes back in the summer, I don't know. Supposedly big wage packet, so. Which makes sense because, Bournemouth. It's a case of how much would he drop his wage demands. What other clubs want
Bournemouth
him.
signed him when they were in the Championship, and I guess he would have had a percentage increase when he went up. But surely he would have had the same thing when they haven't come down, have they, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, what I'd say is we got him from Wigan after they went down, so that wouldn't have been hopefully a significant.
Yeah, he probably had a bit of a step up when he moved, regardless.
Yeah, so when he moved on to Bournemouth, then you'd expect he would have been in the 20s, and then after the wage increase upon promotion, probably in the 30s, you'd like to think for him. I mean, obviously he's not going to expect that now, is he? But
yeah, and obviously we're going to discuss the accounts later, so maybe it's a bit understandable why we're saying we can't afford his wages. But like, we can you afford then? Because if he's a free transfer and you're saying his wages are an issue, are you going to pay a fee for someone? Because in theory, if he does get a little bit higher wages, a player that you'd sign, if you add the wages and the fee together, like it would be similar. But maybe it's the whole not wanting to break the wage structure to sign a player that perhaps isn't first team starting all the time, and that makes sense from that perspective.
Well, that, and if you compare another striker, Liam Cullen, we failed to agree terms of him, so we activated the 1-year clause we had in his contract, which I didn't know he had that 1-year clause.
No, I didn't know either, but the details around that, whether you believe him or not, don't sound very favourable to the club.
No, they don't. But obviously, I think he's 25 now, Liam Cullen. So you could argue at that age, is he deserving of a a standard championship salary? Is he going to be a solid number 9 for us to be relied upon for a full year, or is he somebody happy to have his rotation? Because there's a difference between giving someone a rotation salary and a starting salary.
I think rotation, but I still think a rotation salary is probably more than what he's on. I believe when I was reading about it, he's on like the lowest amount for our first team.
Yeah, and regular first team players. The contract he's on, if I'm correct in saying this, would have been one he was given before he'd really broken through into proper first team professional football. So
I'd imagine he was trying to negotiate something more fair, which it's understandable, and I guess like good on him for doing that. I don't necessarily disagree with what Luke Williams said in the press conference, which was it's giving him something to play for next year. Like he wants that to be the reason why he steps up, essentially. He's trying to say, he's going to earn that contract. He's trying to make it sound positive and all nice and good. But I think that's where you see, like, that's the face of it, isn't it? That's what they want you to see in the nice and good thing. I think what it actually boils down to is the penny pinching as much as they possibly can to keep him on this very low wage until they really have to give him a new one. But personally, I think it might backfire.
I mean, it's a balancing act, isn't it? I think a similar thing happened with Jamie Patterson. If you remember that whole fallout the first time round under Russell Martin, he was playing brilliantly for us. He was on 7k a week. And he wanted to negotiate a higher wage. We said it wasn't something like if he played a certain number of games or if we triggered an extension, we verbally agreed to increase his salary. We didn't. But at the end of the day, it boils down to a balance between keeping players happy, but equally they've signed on the dotted line. They need to honour the term of a contract, just like we do.
So, do you sign an agreement on a verbal? Like that's if it's a verbal Russell Martin as well, who's the manager to walk through the door, because Jamie Patterson basically came straight in as well.
Yeah.
After Martin was kind of brought in. So like who's that verbal agreement with? Because it's the way that he dealt with that. Look, he may be the principle of it, he was in the right, but the way that he reacted probably wasn't correct. And he's only been there for like 6 months and he was playing well, and that's quite soon to be demanding better terms, regardless of what your verbal agreement is. I think and it doesn't sit well then for the players that might be in your longer, that might be like looking to negotiate better agreements that are maybe out of contracts because they've been here longer and they've earned it through a longer period of time. So I don't necessarily fully back Patterson in the way that he went about it. I'm not trying to say the club's innocent either, but I think both, perhaps a bit of wrongdoing both sides. Cullen, to be fair, seems to have got his head down, cracked on. He hasn't really said anything. It sounded like he perhaps is annoyed behind the scenes, but I just think there were some names linked with him before.
Yeah, and much
I think if they come in the summer with 1 year left on his deal, I wouldn't be surprised if he even turns around and says he wants to go, even if the club wanted to keep. I don't think the club would try and stop him, to be honest. I think someone comes in for him, they'd be like, yeah, okay. But if they wanted to keep him, I think he would turn around and be like, well, you didn't value me enough to give me a new deal, so I want to go.
Yeah, but then again, I don't think he would bang on the door to leave his home club. Is number
I'm not
one.
saying you bang on the door. It's where if someone came in and was like, use a bid, we want Cullen. Use it, and that offer of a contract there is probably going to be significantly better than what he's currently on. And I guess it depends the balance of how much he values the hometown club thing versus this disagreement around his contract. Because I think he's got to be frustrated about it, and he's got to be feeling a little bit undervalued, probably, I'd imagine.
Yeah, maybe undervalued, but also I think we'll probably manage. I can't see us selling him even if an offer comes in, unless the offer is okay. There's too much to really turn down for how long he's got on his deal. Just because we've had him for free, so we don't owe anything on him. Low salary. It's like you said, if you let go of Low, who can you really bring in instead?
Yeah, but do you remember Connor Roberts' situation?
That one I think would have been a bit different because we'd given him one contract renewal because he was highly valued coming down from the Prem, and that was under Potter. That was then running down again. It was a similar thing with Roden, if I remember right. If they were to go up a level contract-wise again, they would have already been on near enough 20k a week because we were forced into giving them a new deal when they had like a year left in the deal the first time around. We wouldn't have been able to afford to bump his salary up again. And he was a high earner. We were trying to trim the wage bill. Cullen's probably on about £4,000 if, the numbers being chucked about are correct. So I understand the thing with Roberts. We have pushed people out the door in the past. We're a bit of a sly club. There's no point denying that. Some of the stuff we've done, the Dan James thing, we don't really need to.
I'd probably get pelters for this, but John Joe Shelby as well, just saying, 100%. There's a story there, and I can't wait till the day that comes out.
I'm probably too young for it, but yeah, I there was a lot of funny business going on.
The whole thing of him arguing with the fans at Oxford away when we lost that game, from what I heard, I had family that was in the crowd very near to that argument. And what he was basically, so the fans had a pop saying, like, your experience, you should be doing better, you don't care, and all this. And Shelby basically was like, you have no idea what goes on behind the scenes. And then he was gone. I think because Monk basically took charge not long before. And sorry, that's wrong. Monk took charge season before. Shelby was main starter in our squad up until the moment where he got too many yellow cards. And yeah, I think he had a match suspension because of it, or he had a double yellow and he had a red card either way, match suspension. When he came back, he didn't even make the bench, just out of nowhere. And I think it all went downhill from there a little bit. But I think what had happened is Hugh Jenkins, as much as maybe he done good a lot of time, he basically wanted to cash in on him, and that was that. So because of the suspension, that was kind of like the reason given. Shelby's discipline is not good enough. I think Monk was saying stuff about it in the media when he got the suspension, and then he couldn't get back into the team. And then obviously played in this match against Oxford where they didn't do very well, and that was even better reasoning, especially when he had a confrontation with the fans, and he was like, "Oh, do you know what? The story's there, isn't it? The story's there, but why we had to sell him? Easy one." So perhaps he didn't make it difficult to force himself out, but I think he's the sort of hothead that would just say how it is and not care, which is probably what happened and what was seen. So I think one day maybe there'll be a story out about that, and intrigued to hear it. But I'm convinced that was decided months before it happened, because he'd just been capped for England as well, and I think that was what it was. Oh, he's just been capped for England. We can cash in on this.
Yeah, obviously the value of a player goes up in that instance. But getting back on track, I think if you run for our strikers, Low, if you want to count him as a striker, I know he plays in the wing a lot of the time as well.
Yeah.
Return for his his parent club. Kuharevich and Yates most likely will try and sell them, but most likely we won't be able to, so we'll loan them out. Basically, just leaves you with Cullen at that point, right? So I'd be shocked if even if he wanted to leave. I don't think we'd sanction it. Put it that way.
I don't think he will go. I just think if a club comes in, there might be a conversation. But what you're saying makes complete sense. I just don't have that much faith, I guess. That's the issue. I just I wouldn't put it past them. Because ultimately, I guess, if you look at our strikers, as you just said, Cullen's also the only one that was here last season.
Yeah.
So if you're saying that we're going to be lumbered potentially with like Yates and Kahirovic, who's to say the board won't turn around to say, well, tough, use them?
Yeah, I mean, I think we tried loading them out in January and we couldn't do it. That's
Yeah,
the
but
issue.
in Jan, we still had Lowe, Cullen, and who am I forgetting? I'm not forgetting anyone. Lowe and Cullen, essentially, still there, isn't it? So if one of them was able to be sold, happy days. But if they can't sell either of those two in the summer and Lowe's the only option, but they can sell Cullen, maybe they're like, well, Yates is still here. We paid decent money for him. Get him scoring. Like,
and this is the thing, though. Like, if you look purely on goals, Yates it does occasionally pop up with goals, especially now because his minutes are less as well. But I think if you ask most Swans fans, would you rather start a game on Saturday against Millwall, for example, Cullen or Yates? Most would say Cullen because just purely touches on the ball, Yates sort of goes missing in games.
yeah,
And by the way, let me just make this clear: Jerry Yates, I think he is a good player. I don't think you perform as well as he did for clubs of such a low standard for a few consecutive seasons without having good ability. I do just think though his confidence is shot. Clearly, the style of play, I would have thought it suited him, but it doesn't seem to have. And things when your head's not in it, he's probably not. This isn't me saying that he doesn't try his hardest or whatever, because I don't know. I don't know that. I don't know what's going on in his head, what have you. But you watch Ron Cullen and he busts off the ball. He busts the gut to charge everything down. That's why I sort of expected from Yates coming into the season. That's what you heard about him.
He did start off doing that.
Yeah,
to be fair.
and you just don't really see it anymore. Maybe his heart's not in it now. I don't know. He is getting stick.
I mean, if
well.
they did try and get rid of him in January, then maybe he just
Yeah.
knows his time's up and he's just not bothered. But yeah, I mean, to be fair, they're kind of all on the same amount of goals. I was trying to see how many matches they've all played, but I can't get that up easy quick.
Yeah. I mean, he's one of those
Should've
players.
kept it
I wouldn't be at all surprised if he ends up at like a QPR or a Stoke or Bristol City, Jerry Yates or something, and he bags 15 next season and gets decent plaudits. Like,
Yeah.
I do just think it's a case of it's a bit like Michael Duff, decent manager, probably just the wrong fit.
I mean, he came in with Duff, didn't he? And ultimately, I think he scored most of his goals under Duff. I think he's only scored 2 since Duff left. Yes, okay, so here we are. It's total for Cullen, 44 games played,
Is there as many as that?
29 started, and 7 goals. And Jerry Yates, if I can find him, because I've lost him already.
I didn't expect Cullen to be 44 appearances, I'll be honest with that. Really
42 appearances, 24 goals. 24 started and 8 goals. So, like, stats don't. I understand the narrative of the work rate and what you see on the pitch, but like, they're very similar in terms of their output.
Yeah.
The only thing is, Cullen is averaging 0.04 more shots per game over the season. Then you got Jamal Lowe, 34 games played, 24 started, 9 goals. So his return is a bit higher in terms of per game, but maybe factor in, I think, 3 penalties. I want to say 2 or 3 penalties.
Cullen had a shot at one, didn't he? And not to hamper him for it. I know we won the game anyway, but
I think Yates and Cullen both miss quite a lot of big chances as well.
Yeah, they do seem to. I
know
feel like
Yates
Yates gets crazy stick for it. The reason Yates gets crazy stick for it is because I think there was 3 big chances in 3 games, and they were like, obviously, if you put a normal person in that level of pressure, they'd probably fumble as well. But they looked like some of them. There's one he didn't throw himself at, and he got stick for that, probably rightfully so. And since then, he throws himself at everything. You can't say he doesn't when the ball comes in the box. But there were a couple that they did look like proper one-on-ones. A striker, any championship striker, you'd expect him to score it, sort of thing. So I know
he's not at the best. He's not trying to say. I think I'm not trying to criticize Liam Cullen either, but I just that for me, like, it's not a huge, great deal of difference. I don't think you're necessarily getting massive difference on the pitch from either way. But I would love to keep Liam Cullen around. You've got the aspect of it being homegrown as well, and you get that extra level of passion just from that I think you can never get from players who don't have that. If that's a fair comment, like in the Cardiff game, for example, he will just always get it. Speaking of which, he missed a big chance in the Cardiff game. I think that straight after he scored, he missed one against Norwich on a weekend where he's basically one-on-one. I think Yates missed a very similar one actually away a couple of weeks ago. Middlesbrough or QPR, I think it was. QPR, I think it was in the first half, right at the beginning. Pretty much carbon copy of the chance that Cullen has missed, where a ball's played into the box, lands at him, or like on him on the penalty spot. On both occasions, both players just could not get that first control to then be able to get a shot away before the keepers come and recover the situation. So that initial striker instinct or first touch maybe is letting them both down on occasions. Confidence probably plays a big part in a striker as well. And I would say Liam Cullen, for me, comes across more confident on the pitch, regardless of setbacks. I think Yates is a massive confidence player where when he has setbacks, he struggles to then come back from them. And that probably is why there's such a spiral with the stick that he's got, and then his performance then getting worse.
And it is a crazy one, really, because if Yates scores on the weekend, he ends the season in double figures as our top goal scorer, which is, that's lacking context because currently our top goal scorer's got 9 goals, which is it's shockingly low. It is shocking. I mean, I know we're used to Perot and what have you, but
yeah, I mean, Lowe's on 9, Yates is on 8, Patterson's on 7, Cullen's on 7. So that's like the sharing the load, isn't they? A little bit more than what we're used to, probably. We're usually used to someone like an Andre Ayew or Joel Perot getting towards the double figures and everyone else kind of chipping in here or there. And obviously, if you factor in Ronaldo, who scored 3, if you, in theory, double that for the season and you get 6 as well, maybe if you use your all year, then he's there somewhere as well, isn't he? So he had a decent chance against, I'd say half chance, but he nearly caused issue from in the last game, didn't he, as well? Anyway, let's get back to Huddersfield. Got a bit sidetracked. I don't necessarily go in detail, but maybe there's a few more players to discuss because of their input. So obviously we talked about Jamal Lowe, perhaps ending the season a bit better. Probably don't think he'll come back. I know he's got a contract with Bournemouth in the summer. I've seen actually quite a few clubs linked with him, probably agent talk. There's been about 8 clubs mentioned. What I wanted to say, I know we kind of revisited what we started off on, but what I wanted to say is I've seen him linked with Portsmouth, who are a past club of his. What does that mean for us if a club like Portsmouth can afford his wages and we can't, considering where they're going to be coming from?
What I'd say is Portsmouth, from what I remember, they have actually very wealthy owners. It's just because of the financial burdens they've had in the past, going into administration in the Premier League and tumbling all the way down to League Two, they have always spent within their means on their route back upwards. So it's probably not a case that they can't afford to Portsmouth. They've just always chosen not to. So wherever now they've got, I don't know what their wage bill's like, I'd be guessing there, but a League One wage bill, presumably. Promotion up to the Championship, increased revenue from the Championship, and the Championship revenue is going up anyway. So maybe they've got some breathing room. And also it would be a free transfer, so there's no, it would be a free transfer, so there's no transfer fee they're putting down. But also just because they're linked with him doesn't mean they'll actually get him. They're obviously in the conversation, but the wage demands may still be too significant. We'll have to wait and see.
Are they confirmed now, are they, to come up?
Yeah, they're up. Them and Derby.
Yeah. There we go. So Portsmouth be in the league next year. It's a good away day for anyone.
It's a good away day.
Yeah. South Coast. Yeah, okay, well, we'll see. I don't know if he will go there. I think it might have just been paper talk from what I've seen. Easy link, isn't there, when it's a former club coming into the league. He's already playing in. I think there was a couple of other names like Norwich were mentioned, and the article is pretty much the same website, just changed the changed a couple of words in there. So, but he's definitely going to have interest. That's the point. I don't think I've said all season I wouldn't take him back. Maybe I wouldn't mind so much now. Probably think there's probably other players out there that are more suited to Luke Williams' style. And the fact that he's not really starting probably is a good decision to look elsewhere. But it wouldn't be the end of the world if he did stay, as long as the finances weren't too great. But it looks like that is probably the issue. Anyway, Huddersfield. So the other goals were scored. We mentioned Yates already. He got a goal. I mean, better late than never. If it does his confidence good, and you can maybe get another one at the end of the season. But
Yeah,
he's kind of just
the
seen
game
out
is
the
done
season
by
now,
that
isn't he?
point in time, but
Yeah.
still nice for him to get another goal, obviously. I don't think the fan base particularly hate him. I just think there's probably a bit of a disconnect there where everyone sort of accepts it hasn't really worked as
I
everyone
think
hoped.
he's collateral damage of Michael Duff.
Yeah.
To be fair,
It's like the Sam Klukas effect sort of thing, isn't it? Is the best way you can put it.
see what happens in the summer, right? If he does end up staying here, we got to back him, and hopefully after a summer of training with Luke Williams, we can get a new Jerry Yates next season. But that's looking ahead. We don't know what the situation will be in regards to him, whether he's going, staying. I'm not sure. I'd imagine Williams is going to be looking to bring someone in who's going to do a similar job to him as, what's his name, from Notts County? Lafferty, is it? It's not Lafferty.
Don't think it's Lafferty, no.
You know what I'm talking about. Mine's gone blank.
I'll just get him up quickly so I can.
My mind's gone blank. But the guy that basically bangs the goals in for fun for Notts County.
Macaulay Langstaff.
I knew it begins with an L. That's it.
Everyone,
I'm tired.
Everyone basically saying go after Macaulay Langstaff. I'm not saying he's not a good player, but that's without me ever really seeing him play. But he's 27, so
I mean, I'd imagine you want someone in that mold, not necessarily him. Maybe it will be him, but I think you want someone in that mold that's going to kind of do a similar job.
The only thing that would really, benefit us is that they haven't got promoted, Notts County, unlike Wrexham, who have done the double promotion.
That's crazy.
Well, then they're nowhere near really. What happened was we took the manager, innit?
Yeah, I think they'd started falling off before, but
the fall off was sharp after he left, though.
Yeah,
but yeah, to be fair to him, still got the 28 goals in 46 games, and that's the mid-table side.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think they probably shouldn't expect double promotion. Wrexham, they're kind of a unique circumstance. They got money behind them, haven't they, ultimately, and they did attract a lot of higher league players into non-league at the time, and everyone loves the fairy tale story, but you've got to look at the reality as well, and they've probably got the odds in their favour for what they're doing just because of the backing they got. That's the reality of it, and I'm not saying I don't like to see a Welsh club rise up, even if it's backed by some millionaires, but all of the other clubs they're competing against don't have that luxury. So as much as a double promotion on paper is an amazing achievement, and it still is, they do have that extra help.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
So I would be interested to see how they do next season now, like if they get sufficiently backed again. Like you wouldn't expect them to be near an automatic promotion push or anything, but they could sneak a playoff place. They could be in that conversation.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the more they rise of the leagues and everyone sees this fairy tale story and they know they can afford it, players are going to drop down more willingly, aren't they? So,
well, yeah, they get to be on a documentary as well. You know what I mean?
Snowball effect,
like the Ben Toff, the type of players that it's an attraction.
Who's close to retirement? They'll just go there to have a bit of a kickabout and
nice Joe Allen
package. Joe, maybe.
I'd fall for that. The thing is, he could. You never know. For a bit of fun,
yeah.
But the thing is, I think he'd want to stay here. But
may as well take Ramsey with them. They might actually play 20 games between them. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see if we see Wrexham soon in the same league as us. But I'm sure it might happen. To be honest, that'd be a good away day. But yeah, so Liam Walsh as well. He got on the score sheet. He's another one out of contract. And is it his first goal for the club? Second
this season, yeah.
Second, and very good goal. Outstanding goal, to be honest.
It's your typical you've won the game, you're in injury time, why not sort of strike, isn't it?
It just reminds me, I just wish that he didn't get injured so much. I want him to stay, I want him to get a new deal, but I know that he shouldn't. It's
you can't justify, even if you said, I'll take 5k a week, I don't think you can justify it because you know he's getting injured again. It's sad.
He's having a good run now, isn't he? How many games did he actually play? It's probably the best season he's had in terms of availability, to be fair. I will put it
Every
up
year
now.
has been pretty much the same for him, to be honest. It's,
19
has he played that many
games.
times? 19 games?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's his highest.
yeah.
I could be
Obviously,
wrong.
I think a lot of them would have been off the bench, don't get me wrong. But
Yeah, he only made 5 starts.
yeah, there's
But
quite
to
a
be
few. Like,
fair, a goal return of 2 goals in 19 games is not bad for centre midfield. Although I know he has been coming on as a centre attacking midfielder on
yeah.
occasions, but still
So in
decent.
so in those 19 games, he only played over half hour in 4 of them. And I should say in those 4 games he played over an hour, but that's sort of just the point. Like they're all 20 odd 10, 15-minute bit part appearances for the most part.
So 18 championship appearances this season, 7 last season, five the year before.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
he's on big salary from
that's a big
what I
improvement.
remember.
But
He's on small wages.
no, but what I would say, maybe in the negotiations, right? It depends what he wants. I don't know if he wants to stay or not, but like you'd imagine he'd have to be some sort of willing to take a cut based on what's happened with his injury record. I don't think any club's going to be giving him more based on the risk that he does pose, because it was a risk when he came here in the first place. You know, his turnout for Bristol was 18. He's played more games for us this season than he played for Bristol in 4 years.
Yeah.
That says a lot.
Thing is, for me, I do think there, if not us, there are going to be other championship clubs that want to give him a deal. And that's not because they're unaware of his injury record, but you cannot get quality like his unless there's a catch. If you're one of the teams lower down the table, just teams that could stay up, and Plymouth probably perfect one, for example.
Yeah,
You're looking at your teams coming up, your Portsmouths, your Derbies, QPR. I know there are clubs down there who would struggle to get that level of quality unless there's a catch. The catch of Liam Walsh being he may only give you 15 games if you're lucky, but that could be the difference between you staying up or not. You don't want to rely on a player of that quality when you
yeah.
can't count on them to stay fit.
The
But
only other thing I think as well in regards to us is how many players do we realistically need to bring in the summer? And at what point is it too many players with our financial situation where offering someone like him a new deal, if it's on reduced terms, is beneficial for us? Because if you've got Joe Allen in the same position also going, potentially, you know, like there's a lot of replacement going on. And Patino as well, end of loan. That's 3 centre midfielders that you're looking to replace.
I think we need recruits in midfield anyway, even if everyone's fit, because I feel like there's
But how many can you realistically do at once?
this is the thing. So even the thing about we'll keep them on reduced terms for our position based off our losses we'll get to later, our financial losses, it's still significant to consider. The ability to release Joe Allen and Walsh shouldn't really be overlooked because part of the reason we do get stuck is our wage bill. So why would we willingly sign people on who we sort of proven
Yeah,
we can't rely on from an
you're
injury
right.
perspective?
You're right from the head perspective. If they got like ultimately you're paying for not enough of output on the pitch, we're in a tricky financial situation, and you want to get more from your money essentially. So I know you're right. I think I can deal with it with Joe Allen because of the age factor coming in as well. I do feel like, yeah, he's homegrown. That's the only thing. But really, it's probably is your time is up sort of situation.
Yeah, you're
Uh,
scared with Liam Walsh. You're scared of another like Morgan Whittaker situation where you're like, oh, I can't believe Swansea let him go. What were they thinking? And he's up for Player of the Year
you
shout.
just see what he could offer you,
Well,
and
he's so
then
good. No one's not.
it
He
gets
is a
ripped
brilliant
away.
footballer.
It gets ripped away from you like every time. But then it comes back, and you start believing again, and it gets ripped away from you with another injury. And I think what is making it harder is, like I just said, looking at the stats, he's looking at his best output this season, and again, he's on a bit of a good run now where he hasn't picked up a knock, and you start believing like maybe he's over it. But you just know he'll sign that dotted line and probably get injured in pre-season, and he'll be out till Christmas.
Thing is, we managed him poorly. Probably he played like go back to middle of the season when he had his one run of games of significant minutes. He played 72 minutes against Huddersfield. Then we dropped him down to little bit parts off the bench, which was probably right to do. Started him twice against Borough and Preston. Rested for Southampton when we got drubbed 5-0. then played 82 minutes against Coventry. So at that point, you're thinking, okay, and he scored in that game. He's contributing, he's doing well. But then that was on the 29th of December. We then had West Brom at home on the 1st of January. So, 3 days after.
Yeah.
And we started him again. We started him back to back in 3 days, 10 minutes in, pulls his hamstring, out for 3 months, whatever it was. Like, we don't help him. If you're going to use him, you should start him next game midweek. Don't even play him.
No, I agree. Absolutely agree. Same with Cal
maybe.
Norton. Same thing we did with Cal Norton. And I actually said to Lee on that day, the West Brom game, when we saw the lineup, I was like, oh my God, they're starting Walsh again. I was like, I mean, look, I like seeing him in the starting lineup and he's been doing well, but he's just going to break. And then he broke.
It needs to be, we value you, but we need to protect you. We're going to start you on the Saturday, but then we can't play you again until the following Saturday because
I guess Sheehan was there like, he's turning up for me, he's putting in a shift and we're getting out of our little rut a little bit. It must be hard. He was already stepping in to lead the club as well when it's one of them things that you just, again, perhaps he fell into that false sense of security. I said, it looks like it's all going well. But yeah, probably to help ourselves. Anyway, enough about Liam Walsh. We'll find out about him, Joe Allen, Liam Cullen. Well, Liam Cullen's got an extension for a year. Patterson's been quiet as well, another one. Cal Norton. There's a few.
Patterson's out of contract, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a big one because he's been very good this season as well. What's he on? 8 goals, 6 assists.
And he scored against Norwich, and that was a fantastic strike from the angle that he hit that in.
Looking revitalised since Luke Williams came in again. He's another one who's benefited. Basically, all the attacking players, even not Ollie Cooper. I know he's only have a little bit part of here.
He'll have a bigger part next season.
He's been before. I know we say it every year of him now, don't we? But he has been looking more comfortable.
Yeah, no, I think he's had a better like last half of the season, especially since Luke Williams has come in. He's actually getting on the pitch a bit more and maybe bringing his confidence back. And I think he'll be a bit more involved next year.
Yeah, I still don't think he's hit that purple patch form that we saw under Russell Martin. He looked like a Welsh international for his time, didn't he? I think he's more in the Liam Cullen category of like rotating in and out now rather than a regular starter. But I would love to be proved wrong because you want to see the local talent succeed, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, there's a lot of contract discussions there, and we haven't really heard anything bar on Liam Cullen. With the loans finishing too. It is
concerning.
It's concerning. We'll discuss perhaps in more length in a couple of episodes' time. Maybe we'll have a bit more information as well, but it will be upon us before we know it because obviously it's the last game of the season this weekend, and we've just come out of a draw with Norwich, who have got a lot more to play for, and I think that's why when we look at our form, we discussed it already. It was 3 wins and a draw. Now, the draw against Norwich, like we didn't concede in the 3 wins, 2-2 draw against Norwich. That's still a massive result away from home, especially this stage of the season. They are literally, if they'd won that game, they would have secured their playoff position, and we have essentially made them have to wait until this week now, where they probably, I need to get the goal difference up. They might need to get just at least a point, essentially, to secure
they're probably fine. I think Hull are battling West Brom. Looking at especially because West Brom have lost 3 in a row. They've just lost.
There's a massive goal difference thing again, isn't there? So
7's a difference, which we know first hand.
But it happened to us, to be fair.
Exactly.
Like 7.
It was unheard of when it did happen, but yeah, I mean, I think they'll be fine. Norwich, from memory, who do they have? Was it Birmingham? They have Birmingham.
Yeah, so Birmingham beat Norwich 4-0 to stay in the league, and then Hull have got Plymouth. That's massive. That is crazy. That is a crazy end of the season. That both teams in those games are fighting for playoffs, and then the other teams that they're both playing are fighting to not go down.
Because the thing is, it'll be an interesting game because let's say Norwich versus Birmingham is drawing going into the dying stages, regardless of how Plymouth are doing. Birmingham need a win, basically, right? So the reason that is Birmingham are a point behind Plymouth, who are just outside the relegation zone in 21st. But Birmingham have 4 inferior goal difference. If they got -16, Plymouth have -12. So the only way in which a draw would be good enough for Birmingham is if Birmingham draw and Plymouth lose by 4 goals, because then Birmingham stay up on head-to-head.
Yeah,
But
and if
are Plymouth going to lose by 4 goals at home? Probably not to Hull. Is like Hull
yeah,
probably
but
favourites in the
Plymouth haven't
game.
been great since Schumacher's went.
They're
Schumacher
brilliant
gets
at
it
home,
right.
though. I just can't see them losing by 4 goals at home, especially when it matters that much as well. So the point I was leading to was if Birmingham are drawing towards the end of Norwich, they can't settle for a draw. So Birmingham are going to be pushing the entirety of the game, pretty much.
Hull are also fourth in the away table.
Good game,
I mean,
then.
there's a lot of strings to this, and I think, like what you're saying, are Plymouth going to lose 4-0 at home? Well, if they do, maybe Norwich aren't securely in the playoffs, because all of a sudden Norwich now only need to lose 3-0, and if Birmingham do manage, like it probably won't happen. But someone chucks a quid on those sort of score lines, you might be a wealthy man after the weekend.
And for the sake of it, then West Brom, who they kind of need, they got better goal difference than Norwich. They may overtake Norwich on goal difference. They basically need a point to stay above Hull. West Brom do, because even if Hull then win, the goal difference swing is too much. I mean, for the sake of then they got Preston. West Brom have lost their last 3. Preston have lost their last 4. So that
They've
could
probably
easily,
got the best team to play out of the three of them, though, because Preston are just there.
yeah. They've probably got the most obvious 1-1 draw of all time there, to be honest. West Brom Preston. It just sounds like a 1-1 fixture, doesn't it?
And what did you say? That goal difference is significantly better than Hull's.
Yeah. So a draw would be enough as far as I can see there.
West Brom need a draw. Do you know what? Like, a lot of crazy stuff can happen on the last day of the season. And I think the Norwich Hull situation and the Plymouth Birmingham situation, it just could be a twist there,
And I'll be rooting for Plymouth to stay up, as should all of us, because Whittaker, there's been links for him, Sporting, who bought Gyökeres for another former Swans player, bought him for 25 mil or whatever it was, and there's been links to Sporting for 20 mil for Whittaker. So how mad would that be? You got 2 former Swans ending up with Sporting.
So what you're saying is Charlie Patino, who didn't quite hit it out at Swans on loan, is going to end up at Sporting Lisbon in like 2 years, and
quite
would
possibly
be worth like 100 million.
It's mad though, isn't it? Gyökeres again, like 90 million pound links or whatever. Couldn't hit the barn door for us. Not that he was playing very much, mind. I think Jamal Lowe was keeping him out of the team from memory under Steve Cooper. Whittaker sold him for £1 million, even though he had 2 years in his deal. He's about to be shipped off for 20. Glad we got the sell-on clause, don't get me wrong. But I feel like I bring up Whittaker every podcast. I'm still not over it. I'm really not.
There's a few of them, to be fair. A few of them that are mismanaged, I guess. But yeah, like interesting ramifications going into this last day. Also, though, Ipswich are fighting Leeds for second place. It's probably going to be Ipswich.
They need a point, and they've got.
I think even more likely Ipswich will get second than the two we just discussed with the relegation and the playoffs. I think there's more chance of them changing than this one, but it's still on the cards. Ipswich have got to play Huddersfield, who, as much as they're not, as I said already, confirmed relegated mathematically, they pretty much are because of their goal difference. Yeah. So whether they play better or worse as a result of that fact could influence this, because Leeds have got a better goal difference. So Leeds just need a win.
Yeah, they just need a point, Ipswich. I don't see a world in which Ipswich lose on the weekend.
But there's always an upset, isn't it? There's always an upset on the last day.
I hope it happens, because, like we said, we need the money from Perot. But it's worrying me, this playoffs of Leeds. Like, funnily enough, if you look at the teams who are likely to be in that playoff, if you assume it's the current 4, Southampton are on shocking form, West Brom are on shocking form, Leeds indifferent at best. You'd actually look at Norwich and fancy them. You really would.
Yeah, or Hull, if they sneak it, if Hull manage to sneak in, I think they've got a couple of players that could definitely do damage. I'm surprised that they aren't in there, to be honest. I think they should have probably done better.
As soon as January passed, I was like, right, they're finishing top 6 then. I'm surprised they, like you say, are a little bit higher.
I think it's I saw people floating their manager for manager of the year, and to me, they've underperformed with the squad that they got, with the players they brought in, especially after January, like you said. I can't see a world where you can give him manager of the year.
No, I mean, it's Kieran McKenna. There's no debate really, is there?
Him, the only other one I would potentially, and I would give it to Kieran McKenna. I wouldn't give it to this other person I'm going to mention just because he hasn't been there for a season. I do quite often think for manager of the year, you should preference somebody that's gone all year. But not to discredit what I'm going to say now, Sheffield Wednesday manager, him
Danny
to turn
Rose,
around the Sheffield Wednesday have had, they literally had the worst start in Championship history, and they're safe.
I mean, they looked dead and buried, didn't they? I think we've talked on the podcast when we were in the relegation battle about who's gone, and we were like, all right, Rotherham are gone, Sheffield Wednesday's probably gone. It's just that last spot. So the fact that they're safe with a game to spare.
Well, I'm saying they're not actually safe. If they lose, Birmingham could go ahead of them.
I mean,
the goal difference is quite similar.
Yeah, I'd be surprised. I mean, they got Plymouth below them as well.
Blackburn technically as well, but I think their goal difference is a bit better.
The form they've been on, though, the draw against them that we secured a month back or whatever, actually looks a pretty good point. They're on stunning form.
Yeah, they've been very good the second half of the season. As I said, since the manager change, they have turned it around quite to be in it with the chance of favourably staying in the league based on where they were. I think everyone thought they were gone. Like Rotherham are now gone, like gone at the bottom, but they were below Rotherham.
Yeah, which is nuts looking back, really, isn't it?
Yeah. So fair play to the manager. Is it Daniel Grohl? Is that his name? Probably butchered his name.
Roller, I don't know.
Yeah, it's something like that.
We're not pronunciation experts. Apologies to anyone who's offended.
I always get called out for it. I'm really bad, and I know I'm really bad. I should do more practice. I'll get better, I'm sure, in time. But yeah, he's done a very good job to keep them in the league, and I think maybe not manager of the season because, like I said, he hasn't been there all year, so it's difficult to then take that away from someone like McKenna, who back-to-back promotions with Ipswich. Like we said, this was the most competitive championship season with the teams involved, and for them to kind of break up the three that came down, who were all expecting to go back, at least two of them to go back up, and then one to be top end of the playoffs, to kind of break that up and maybe get second place now. I think that's an outstanding job, isn't it, to come up from League One and do that? That's crazy.
I don't think it's ever been done. It goes without saying it's nuts, especially like you say. I think Leicester, Leeds, Southampton, who came down, there's an argument that that's the strongest three teams to ever get relegated from the Premier League, and the fact they kept and probably improved in many ways the squads they had to come back up, the managers they had. You know, Russell Martin's untested, but they were good managers. It's yeah, it's nuts. I hope for all the world if they do go up, they stay up because they fully deserve to. And I can't imagine what the buzz must be like in that fan base, like the journey they would have been on over the last couple of years. Like go back to when we came down. I think it was our first season in the Championship. They finished dead last. They had Paul Hurst as manager at the start. They got rid of Mick McCarthy, tried changing the style, backfired entirely. It's taken them some time, but they've recruited well. But I do think they've just got a top-class manager. And I hope they keep him, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if he gets poached like they all do when there's a young English manager.
Yeah, and they've scored the most goals in the league.
Which is also nuts. Okay, let me correct myself. He's Northern Irish. Before anyone comments that. I knew it.
We're Swansea fans.
As soon as I said the name, I said McKenna. I was like, right, there's no way that's an English surname. Let me double check that right now.
But yeah, so Sheffield Wednesday have got Sunderland on last game, so that's probably favourable for them. Sunderland have kind of been rubbish since they sacked their manager. They butchered their season when they sacked their first manager, to be fair.
Because they were in and around the top six when that happened.
Yeah, they were literally like playoff.
They were like 8th or 9th or something.
They decided Mowbray won the direction anymore, and Beale was a massive mistake. So since they sacked Beale, they've obviously got a caretaker now, but it's just like their season was done then. And they've just fizzled out, just kind of in mid-table doing nothing at the moment. So Sheffield Wednesday, good game for them to finish on, really, to secure their championship status. It's going to be an interesting look. There's a lot of action. There's a lot of things being played for. Swansea might not be involved necessarily in any of it. We've got our own battle. Our battle, and I do want to kind of discuss this a little bit because I think I got a bit of an opinion here in regards to our season. What do you think of our season on the whole? Let me ask you that question before I talk about it.
I mean, you have to break our season up into parts, don't you? I think
just review it as an overview. Like, say we're 13th now, so based on where we're likely going to finish, we can actually go down to 16th is the lowest. How would you rate that?
Seeing as I predicted us at the start of the season, we'd be 11th. You'd say expected. If you want to give the season as a whole a score, you'd say like a 6, wouldn't you? It's just a standard. Move on. Nothing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how would you review Russell Martin's time at Swansea City?
I would say entertaining at times, naive at times. I'd probably say a 7.5.
Okay, so and how do you think the general fan base reviews Russell Martin's time at Swansea City?
They probably see him as a messiah who did nothing wrong and was ousted.
What I'm only making these points right on the back of the other day where I think we had a bit of a rant in the last podcast about the whole lawsuit situation. We haven't had any update on that, so I'm not going to revisit that. But I was making the point I didn't understand the amount of fans sticking up for him in that argument. Go check that out if you want. There's a little bit on it. There's a bit on TalkSport about it from Michael Jordan. That's his name, isn't it? I don't think it is Michael Jordan. You know what? Simon Jordan, sorry.
I was going to say, unless he'd switched his interest from the NBA to the EFL.
Again, names wrong, left, right, centre tonight. It's been a long week. I have to apologise. I'm a bit tired. But yeah, so Simon Jordan did a little bit on TalkSport about it. I echoed kind of what I said in a probably more polished way, with a lot more background in terms of the goings on in that field as well. But I was just having a bit of an issue with how a lot of our fans still stick. Why are you sticking up for him in this issue? He's at battle with the club due to money, basically. We're in a bad money situation and we're trying to get more money that we are due for the situation that arose with him undermining his contract to go to another club. That's the bottom line of what's happening. That's why he's getting sued and not Southampton, because he's the one that was in contract with Swansea, not Southampton. So if he signed for Southampton when Swansea didn't approve of it, which they clearly didn't because they weren't happy with the compensation, then Russell Martin's our fault. That's it narrowed down to the lowest form of explanation. So I just wanted to point out that in Russell Martin's first season in charge, because he's deemed as this amazing manager that brought such good times to Swansea and all the rest of it, yeah. But in Russell Martin's first season, if I can actually get it up here, that would be good. He finished 15th with 61 points. And currently, this season, we are sitting 13th with 57. So, okay, points a little bit less. I think that's largely due to the quality of the top four, where the points are taken more up there. But yeah, 30. So if we get a result this week now against Millwall, we can only fall below Millwall, actually, who are currently in 16th. We are on 57 points. Go Watford in 14th on 56. Sunderland are on 56. Millwall are on 56. So in theory, we can go below all of them. But probably won't go below all of them. Obviously, if Millwall beat us, we will definitely drop one place at least. If we manage to win, we will maintain 13th position in a season where we've had three managers. It's been labelled the worst season like in ages. Michael Duff was a disaster and his style of football was horrible. The money we spent in the summer was such a waste and the recruitment was awful, but we still managed to finish potentially higher than Russell Martin did in his first season. And at that time, everyone was just screaming, trust the process. Just want to put context out there in regards to like what you actually deem as a success and what you deem as a failure, because I found that quite interesting when you compare them.
I think the thing with Russell Martin's football, we saw it in the first full season, and we've seen it in this first full season. He's out of Southampton, and the stats will back this up, as I'll get on to now. The teams appear to perform better than actually transpires come the end of the season. So yeah. I don't have the stats from that first season to hand, but from memory, familiar with expected goals across an entire season is a fairly reliable way of seeing if a team has ended up being where it deserves to be, whether they've underperformed in front of goal, etc. From memory, even though we were 15th, we should have really been challenging more in the playoff battle, but for whatever reason, the way we were defending. Yeah. So this season, again, if you look at the XG table across the entire year, they should be top. The order would be Southampton, Leicester, Ipswich, Leeds. So this is the same top four, just in a different order. So again, something hasn't quite gone the way it should have. The expected goals for they should have scored more goals than anyone else in the league. It has actually ended up being Ipswich, like you said. This season, though, what did you say? We're in 12th currently. Am I right in saying
13th.
that? 13th. This says we should be in 14th. So we are. I know we've had different
we're
managers.
Where we should be.
We are where we should be. I'll just chuck this in for fun. Cardiff on this table at 22nd. I thought that would be funny to say.
We looked at that table very early on in the season that highlighted Cardiff were a bit of an anomaly.
Yeah, and I guess they still are. Like we don't watch them play regularly, so maybe there's reasoning for this. I'm not sure. I think if it's anything to be concerned about, usually over across an entire season, it can just be valid reasons for. Like West Brom are in 19th on this table. They're in the playoffs in real life. For the most part, it's fairly reliable though. Like Norwich are on 8th, Hull are in 7th. The top four. Borough in 6th, Coventry in 10th. Most teams, it's a fairly reliable indicator of where they've actually finished. Rotherham obviously a dead last. Preston in 23rd. So there are like some outliers for the most part.
Preston was the other one we highlighted along with Cardiff when we looked at it the first half of the season as well.
And they're still down there. I mean, have Cardiff...
Well, they're 10th at the moment. Preston 10th, Cardiff 12th.
They haven't really dropped off in form, Cardiff, have they? Like
they had a bit of a blip, I think, around January when all that stuff was coming up with the manager and they didn't sign anyone. Then they kind of turned it round and won like 4 in a row before we played them. And then ever since we played them, they've kind of been like up and down, like a yo-yo, 1 win, 1 loss, 1 win, 1 loss.
Yeah, they've drawn, I think, the least number of games in the league, bar Ipswich from memory.
5 draws.
Yeah, and then Ipswich are on... Oh, Leicester, sorry. Not Ipswich.
Leicester on 4.
Yeah. But no, the overall point, I think Russell Martin teams always tend to create chances, but there's a naivety.
Yeah. And that's fair. I wasn't necessarily trying to say he's a bad manager, but I just think he's held in a higher regard than perhaps his performances should be held in. He brought some good memories, and I will always remember them. The double, of course, being that specifically. I think as time goes on, that probably will be his legacy. It's the double.
Yeah.
Because ultimately the rest was meaningless, and he probably should have done better. That's what it boils down to. So last season, we actually finished with 66 points. In theory, if we beat Millwall this week, we'll be on 60. Now, if you had said after Duff was sacked, we would finish only 2 wins behind where we finished last season, considering how high people praise the football we were playing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That adds a level of context there that I think is like, I think there's a little bit of a reality check needed, and the fact still stands. If we do manage to finish 13th, and this is a fact, Russell Martin is the worst performing manager since we got promoted to the Championship back with Roberto Martinez.
And another one, just for further comparisons, because look what he's gone to achieve. Graham Potter, his first season, we finished on 65 points. If we win on the weekend, we finish on, I want to say, 60. 5-point difference between a manager who was then poached for Premier League Brighton.
Yeah, look at the squad
and the season with Luke Williams ending it well, but Sheehan and Duff beforehand. So I think we can't really I just snapped your hand off for 60 points around Christmas time. That would have seemed unthinkable.
All I can say is Steve Cooper needs more credit. That's all I want. Like, that's what I take from all of this. Steve Cooper is like so underrated amongst Swans fans.
Good manager, just not a Swans manager. That's I also think.
Do you know what? Like, I just don't care if he's going to get the results and get us to the playoffs back-to-back times like that. I was happy watching that football.
Do you remember watching the football? Because it was towards the end, it was burning my eyes. I'm not gonna lie to you.
It was burning my eyes during Russell Martin's 21 match with only 3 wins streak as well. So
The one final thing I would say, and this is a counterpoint to what you said with Russell Martin. Russell Martin, I think, has the best starting 11 in the league. I said at the start of the year, I probably maintain that now. So you'd look at 84 points and say that's probably an underachievement.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying
Equally,
to say. I think he should have done better this year. And I think the everyone says if he was backed, if he had the funds, if he had the resources, the players, we would be up there. We would be up there. Well, he's got it now, and he's bottled it.
but equally, go back to let's just look at that playoff final team. Right, that was Steve Cooper's last game in charge. He had Freddie Woodman in goals, who at the time was probably getting Premier League shouts. Back three of Norton, Cabango, Gurkey. Norton, obviously, keep in mind he was 4 years younger at the time, so that's it's a top quality defender back then. Mark Gurkey was then getting an England call up within a year. Mac Grimes, he's Mac Grimes. Connor Roberts, a right wing back, Welsh international. Up front, Lowe, who's obviously doing well, but Andre Ayew also. I think the squad that he had, there's some, especially Ayew in there, there's some players in there that I think most clubs can only dream about. So would you honestly say anything, especially in that second season where you had time for it all to come together, would you say anything less than the playoffs would have been acceptable, really? Keep in mind it's a weaker league at the time.
I think he had a worse squad than Graham Potter had.
Did you? I mean,
yeah.
He bred so many of those players for Potter. Like, I think you have to
He
look
might
at...
have bred them, but they were all part of the academy and ready to go. He didn't breed. He didn't breed them. They were winning like Premier League 2 and stuff. They were at a decent level before. They might have had the exposure to like first team football, a lot of them. Then, he came 20 million for Ollie McBurney a year after he broke into the first team. And Dan James, you know what I mean? Like, look at the players that he had there. You had Leroy Fer was playing. He started with Martin Olsen. Mike Van der Horn was there for the year. Do you know, these players were playing Premier League football for us. Nathan Dyer, Wayne Routledge. Like,
what I would say when we say like ready, like I think Dan James had just been on loan in League Two and couldn't get a kick, and he was about to go back out on loan to League Two.
Maybe not so much him, but McBurney, Grimes,
Mac
Felton,
Grimes,
who all stepped in. They were definitely ready.
Everyone told him to sell Mac Grimes because they just didn't think he was good enough. He'd been on loan in Northampton. That was probably the highest level of football he played at the time. I think if it weren't for Potter, Grimes would have moved on. We wouldn't have our captain still.
Probably, but I think also the relegation. Like, I think he was perhaps forced into playing them players because of it. But regardless of them ones that came from the academy, you still got the likes of Mike Van der Horn, who was in goals for us, Nordveld. He was a reserve keeper in the Premier League. Whether you rate him or not, still played at that level for a long time. Dyer, Routledge. We brought in Selina, who was highly rated at that time as well. I know there's some duds we brought in, McKay and Asoro, but let's leave them at the door. You said Connor Roberts. Carl Norton was still there as well. Well, he's still here now, but more perhaps useful for more.
There were just square pegs and round holes when he was there, I guess is what I'm trying to say, though. Like Nathan Dyer, this wasn't the same Nathan Dyer we had in the Premier League. Routledge was up front, believe it or not, at times, because we had Courtney Baker-Richardson as the only other striker who we had to make do with. There were times where Kyle Norton...
we had McBurney, didn't we?
Well, yeah, but then he did was it the DUI thing, or was that after? Or he was suspended or he was injured? But there were times when he was gone and he had to make do with Baker-Richardson, is what I'm trying to say.
I thought he did. I thought Baker-Richardson done all right, though, to be fair. He scored a couple of goals for us.
Would you think he did all right if he was in a Steve Cooper team? Or do you think Potter found a way to make it work?
I mean, we never saw that, did we? But, like...
It's a hypothetical, I know.
Regardless, right? Out of the players that I've just mentioned that Potter lost, Cooper, the ones that Cooper brought in, he also nurtured. So, like, it's all well and good saying he now has got an international cap, but when he first came into the squad, no one would have expected he'd even come back and play again after that Hull performance. It was awful. Obviously, we had Brewster, Conor Gallagher and stuff, and they've all... Brewster maybe not so much made him a name for himself since, but, like, I think he brought youth in as well. It's not like these youth were ready to go. That's why they were coming to us. Like, I still maintain, I think he came down from the Premier League. At least half of the squad he had available to him had Premier League experience. Yes, okay, Andre Ayew came back for Steve Cooper, and you perhaps had Borja Baston for half a season, but on the grand scheme of it, maybe not too much difference. And the players that we came through our academy were a bit more experienced by the time Cooper took him over, and that's probably what allowed him to get the results that he got. But I do think, and I'm not criticising Potter because I think he did a really good job. He was untested when he came in, as well, not really done English football or anything like that. And he got him playing some really good stuff. And obviously, Man City Cup game, one of the highlights, even though it was a game that we should have won that we didn't. I do think the squad ultimately was better then than it was when Steve Cooper took over, even if it's the narrowest margin. I'm just trying to say, like, maybe, Steve Cooper getting to the playoffs shouldn't be discredited because of that, really, I don't think.
No, the fact he did it twice as well. A lot of the time,
yeah,
it's difficult to do it twice. I'm not saying he's not a good manager. I just think it's an achievement in itself, and it's going to sound awful. It's an achievement in itself that he managed to be the most successful Swansea manager since coming back down to the Championship, and he's probably still my least favourite bar Duff. I think he's an internet brilliant for Wales. I'd love him for Wales. Did brilliant at Forest. I think it was a harsh sack, and I just don't think he's suited Swansea personally.
Maybe not. Yeah, maybe not. I think, though, what I will say is his first season, if Morgan Gibbs-White didn't get injured and then recalled, and they actually signed a striker in that January, like say they brought
Woodrow was one that was talked about a lot.
When did we get Brewster?
No, Brewster was the first season. I think you're on about the second season. We brought in...
yeah, I'm on about the second season. Yeah. So Gibbs-White was their second season, wasn't he?
Because we were in an automatic promotion battle, if you remember. We brought in a load of loans who just didn't do anything. Morris did his ACL. Ariola got injured.
Yeah, but that's another one. I also think if Jordan Morris didn't snap his leg, that we perhaps would have got second. Big call. We were in second at the end of January.
We just, even brilliant player from what I know of him, Morris, but we just looked so very bad. I'm not sure how much of a difference. We had Jokeres. I know he hadn't hit the heights of Coventry.
He got recalled, didn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he couldn't get a kick for us. Jamal Lowe was keeping him.
Yeah, I mean, it's all ifs and buts, isn't it? But I think, though, what you can say is Cooper and Martin, that second half of their second season, you could see similar themes with the manager kind of checked out. So maybe that's a bigger problem. And I think a lot of Steve Cooper's criticism comes from that period because of all the links with like Crystal Palace and stuff. And people hold a grudge against our performance in the playoff final because they thought he was checked out already.
It was negative. It was really...
maybe it was. But look at the Brentford team. They're still in the Premier League. And look at Ivan Toney, what he's doing now and what he's getting linked to. So, like, I don't think you can hold a grudge, really.
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, because I just had it up. I couldn't exactly remember how good that Brentford team was. Then I looked at it. It's like, wow. Obviously, they had David Raya in goal, now of Arsenal.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Dalsgaard, Janssen, Pinnock. They had Mbuemo and Ivan Toney starting up front. They had Jensen and Jan out the midfield, was still there playing for them now. On the bench, Marcus Force. They had Winston Reid. That's one I completely forgot was even there.
Let's be totally honest. They were better than us. They were better than us when they beat us the year before in the playoff semis.
Yeah, we undeserved.
And they were better than us when they beat us in the final. And Fulton's red card as well did play. I know we were down,
ridiculous, wasn't it?
We kind of finished the game off. It was a bit unfortunate. Unlucky it was. Probably was, I guess it is right because ultimately he did do the red card offence, even if it was accidental.
Yeah.
It just wasn't our day. It just wasn't our day. I think in hindsight, it's easy to look at the way Brentford have gone for their business ever since. Look at the players and how they've developed. Ivan Toney, do you reckon he's going to move this summer? Probably will. Big money. And that's what we lost against. Thomas Frank is still there as well, so shows that he's done a good job.
Oh yeah, good manager Thomas Frank. I don't think any single neutral fan likes him. I think
I don't like him.
I think he's probably purposefully irritable at all times just to get under people's skin, and he knows what he's doing. He's probably a lovely guy. He just knows how to handle press conferences perfectly to wind people up.
Yeah, and he did that. We had a mini rivalry with him, didn't we, really, that season? And since the season before. During the Steve Cooper days, I think there was a bit of a rivalry with Brentford, and they ended up coming out on top.
Yeah, it's hard to call it a rivalry. They just battered us every time, apart from that one FA Cup game under Potter.
Yeah, well, we got a highlight from that, so it's all good.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, let's end off. We did say we were going to discuss it, so the accounts quickly, because I think I said this wasn't going to be that long, and we've just been rambling away. But that's fine. That's always good when we kind of get lost in a train of thought about the Swans, because get the best talking then, really, didn't you?
Yeah.
So Swansea City have published its accounts for the year ending in July 31. So basically, this would be last season. Up to the end of last season. So like Russell Martin's second season, if that's the easiest way to picture this. These are the accounts for that period. Reporting a pre-tax loss of 17.9 million. Massive amount, really. Don't know if I was expecting that.
Is that including player sales, or is that just operational losses?
So I'll just go on to read a little bit more what it says, and then if it doesn't answer that question, we'll have a look. Turnover increased to 1.8 million from previous year to a figure of 21.5 million, including significant 600,000 jump in commercial revenue. I don't think 600,000 is that significant in the grand scheme of what we're discussing here, but okay. Player trading produced a profit of 4.5 million. This figure does not include the sale of Joel Perreault to Leeds United, which occurred after the end of the financial year reflected in these accounts. Does that answer your question?
I think it includes player sales based off that. I'm not that's concerning.
Yeah. Up to that date, basically. So it's just all of the accounts.
Perreault's come in after, but when you think that's 11 mil, and that'll be paid in installments, but still, it doesn't. Even if Perreault was in that period, it wouldn't have covered the deficit, so which is worrying.
6 mil, 6.5 mil still lost if Perreault was included there. Yeah. So I got a little bit of extra information if you look a bit further back, because there's a lot of concern about this, understandably. So 17 million last year. The year before was around 13 million, and the year before that was about 4 million. I don't understand. Well, I do understand. I was going to say I don't understand why it's increasing every year, but it's player sales and ultimately, and transfer wheelings and dealings, wages and all the rest of it. And people wonder why we have to keep selling. I mean, it's right there, isn't it? The fact that Perreault potentially can rise to like 15. I know this was last summer we discussed it, and they would have obviously known this, or at least roughly. They were always selling Joel Perreault from this information. I think it's quite clear to see that. I know there was a chance that, is he going to stay, or maybe he's going to stay now. Clearly, it was never happening. And if it wasn't him, it was someone else that was going to go for the same fee, but there probably wasn't anyone else that was going to go for the same fee. So he was probably always going, and probably explains why he handled it the way he did. Like perhaps he knew that the club needed to cash in on him, and he never really tried to force him to move or anything, because he kind of knew it was just going to happen when the fee was met by whatever club met it. And we probably tried to squeeze as much out of it as we could. Probably couldn't quite get what they wanted, but when you're in this sort of situation, it's probably what normally happens. You have to settle for a little bit less than what you wanted because you're desperate, really.
And the concerning thing, what did you just say? You said £18.6 million this year, £13 million.
17.5, I think it was. 17.9, sorry.
17.9 this year. And last year, did you say 13?
Yeah, roughly 13, it says.
And then the year before, was it 3?
4.
So, point I'm getting to is that's only, roughly about 6 million shy of breaking FFP, unless I'm mistaken. Non-expert, but reading something here which confirms it's done over a 3-year rolling period, I believe. Maximum loss limit is now £13 million per championship season across the 3-season period, meaning £39 million across 3 years.
I don't know. Does it include the investment stuff that they've done?
This is the thing. Does it say what? I don't know what sort of loss that is. Is that loss because we're paying out on wages, in which case it would count? I don't think investment into the club's infrastructure counts towards it. Like if you build a training ground, but we haven't done that, have we?
No, and like academy money and stuff like that, I think doesn't include in this either.
All I would say is we are fine, and they've said we're fine, but we are probably closer to the FFP line than maybe we feel comfortable being.
So my view is, sorry, just something popped up that caught my eye. Sam Parker hasn't turned down a new deal. He's willing to negotiate. I didn't know there was talks there, but
Well, yeah, he's getting a bit sticky, but it's just agent doing his thing. He's 17, like he's done nothing wrong.
Yeah, he's played 4 games in a year. Like this, see how next season goes, and then look at a new deal. Anyway, sidetracked. Yeah, so I want to go and look. I haven't scrutinized these accounts in detail. I've just seen the press release, really, and a couple of opinions and stuff like that. A couple of interviews, the chairman saying it's okay, and they're trying to brush it off. Trust's trying to brush it off as well. Obviously, perhaps they got more information. Maybe that more information makes it better, but for fans, it's a little bit of a concern. Coleman, I think, is coming under a bit of scrutiny because maybe he's not as transparent as what people want. I'm going to try and do a little bit more research into it before I fully fledge my opinion. I know you mentioned there was a good interview done in regards to this.
Yeah, it hasn't been released yet from what I could see, unless I'm missing something. But the Swans Trust have interviewed Kieran Maguire, who's a financial expert on all things like football finances. And he would have broken down those accounts and basically said what we're incapable. We don't have the know-how to lay out exactly what the issues are, how severe they are, how solvable the problems are. So I'd keep an eye on the Swans Trust Twitter or YouTube or something. That would be the place I imagine to find it.
Yeah, so I want to see that when it comes out.
Yeah, I did have a check just before we started recording. They have last year's interview with him, which I didn't even realize they did, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm sure last year's one wasn't that bad from him. He didn't sound that concerning. So it'd be interesting to see now that it's a bigger loss.
I think what's worth remembering is he does this every time an account comes out in the EFL, he'll look at it because it's public information, his company's house. He sees obviously every single club. There are far worse clubs than us, but I don't think that should be an excuse to be.
Yeah, well, this is what I was going to say, right? So I want to look into how the rest of the league is doing. Now, a bit of work, I know, but I want to just not detail, but I want to see an overview of like where are we in line with the rest of the league when it comes to these accounts and losses. I know it's a bit of an issue across the league, but are we top end, bottom end, middle? Like, where are we in relation? Because there's 2 things here. Obviously, one of them could be that we are really bad. We are not doing very well. We need to be doing better. Or are we just part of a wider problem that football is just in a really unsustainable place right now? And the championship's in a bit of trouble, maybe?
It's not just the championship. If Premier League clubs are getting sanctions at left, right and centre, I do think the bubble's going to burst. And there's talk of an independent regulator being imposed by the government. And it probably will help without, again, being an expert on it. I do feel that whilst it's needed, I do worry about how savable a lot of the situation is at this point. I feel like a lot of the power in English football now belongs to a very select group of clubs and owners at the very top of the pyramid, as we've seen with the FA Cup regulations are now come in, which has sort of disregarded the needs of the vast majority of the pyramid. I think you're constantly chasing the golden egg, which is promotion to the Premier League. And the issue now is you're chasing and you get there. And then all of a sudden you need to stay there, or else, unless you've got the money to fund losses in years to come, you need to come straight back up with parachute payments. Otherwise, you're in a world of mess. When we came down, we cut our cloth, and we never stopped cutting. We still need to cut now. Our wage bill, even though we've probably been fairly sensible in knowing when to sell a player, our wage bill needs to be as high as it does just to create a squad that's worthy of the championship.
Just to be competitive. And then you could argue this season we haven't been for large parts of it.
But how do you solve the issue? I mean, you can impose a wage cap, but then obviously that needs to be an agreement.
Yeah.
Across the entire EFL for a wage cap, but then can you impose the same wage cap on, say, a Leeds United as you do a Rotherham? Does it have to be based on turnover? The turnover purely on like gate receipts and commercial income between the top and bottom of the league, it'll be significant to an extent, but would it be significant enough to like properly impose a real feasible wage cap? Because let's say the going rate for a good player in the Championship right now is £15,000 a week. If you say right now it's £7,000 upon the expiry of the current contract, do you think these players are going to stick around? Do you think they're going to go abroad?
Yeah.
Like the ones who are good enough will leave.
Yeah,
Unless
it's tricky.
like you can govern English football to an extent, but then unless there's an agreement in place for FIFA, which is completely unrealistic, it's not going to happen. Then how do you solve the issue? It's concerning.
I don't know what the resolution is, but I think there's a bubble burst coming along. Just got to try and get through it, haven't you? Ultimately, I don't know the solution. What you were just describing, though, again, maybe this is a controversial thing to say, but I think you can understand to an extent why decisions are being made. Like, we hear a lot about the recruitment and the data-driven approach, and the reason they signed the players they signed, the reason they went with Michael Duff and a change of direction. Maybe you can understand why those decisions were made based on all of what you've just discussed there in regards to like chasing that golden bullet of the Premier League and the money that comes with that. And it's what's needed, and they're just desperately trying to get there. They're trying to do everything they can, things in a different way, looking at the data, how can we do things better to try and get there, But I think every club's trying to do the same, and it's a tricky situation to navigate.
The issue I have with the data-driven approach is until you see results bear fruit, it's just words. Like it looked brilliant on paper, didn't it? When Paul Watson came in, he's come from Luton, they've done this, it's worked. They've got promoted to the Premier League. By all accounts, he didn't seem to have much influence on the footballing side of things at Luton. It was more the business side of things. If you had not been told about the whole data-driven approach, would you look at what the management did in the summer, what they did with our squad, as not just innovative, but a sensible, sustainable approach? They've come in, fired, basically ousted the manager as far as you can tell. I know there's politics there, but ousted the manager as far as you can tell, not backed him, let him go, who delivered 7 wins and 2 draws at the end of the season, someone who had the fan base on their side. Brought in a manager to completely rip up the style of play, recruited specifically for that one manager rather than a style of play which we've always had, then sacked him, and then you've got an imbalanced squad on big money who a lot of them shouldn't be here. That's not a data-driven approach. That's just madness, is the truth of it.
When you put it like that, I'd agree with you. I just don't necessarily share all of the same opinions if that's what happened. But that's another podcast. That's definitely another podcast.
Yeah.
In regards to Russell Martin and the way that his departure, I'm mainly referring to. I don't.
Yeah.
I think he's created a narrative cleverly in the media. That's what I'll say. That's my opinion.
One other thing that I would point out is if you look back, I'd actually say go back all the way to when Potter was here, the entirety of our tenure in the Championship. Michael Duff is probably the manager in terms of players who left and players brought in terms of net spend in a window. Considering how long we've been in the Championship as well, and we don't have parachute payments, we probably back Michael Duff more than any other manager financially.
Yeah, and that's what I mean in regards to like their decision making.
And that to me is crazy. Like there was so much turbulence in the summer. How can you justify spending the sort of sums of money we were on players to, not even to match a current style of play, to completely rip everything up and start from scratch? It wasn't the right time to do that. We've been begging.
No, but they didn't have any players, did they? It's not like we didn't really get rid of a load of. We didn't sell a bunch of players. It was just Perot.
It was Perot and Encham.
And Cham was kind of like
he threw his toys out and left and things like that. But I don't know.
Other than that, it was just the loans that ended and the contracts that ended. Latipodi and Manning, and I discussed again in the last podcast at length what I think happened there. There's a couple of red flags for me in regards to the way Manning's situation was dealt with, the way that Russell Martin spoke about it, and the way they both ended up at the same club. This is what makes me skeptical of the whole narrative of him being forced out. I also don't think you survive the poor form that he survived if he's forced out then several weeks later. Some just don't add up to me, especially with the lawsuit and stuff now. But I'm not going to revisit all of that. But I do think that he is good in the media and has created this situation that seems all the people that enjoyed him as a manager here back him to say that he was wrong. It was wrongdoing against him. I'm not saying there wasn't any wrongdoing against him, but he's definitely manipulated the situation to his advantage, I think, in that regard. And when it comes to then all of the things you said that came from that in regards to ripping up style of play, going a different direction. It depends if you think if he was forced out. I completely agree with everything you just said. If he wasn't forced out, I feel like there's a little bit more understanding of where they went with their decision in making.
I think it's a lack of research. Sorry, go on.
I was just saying, but it's a big conversation to get into. That's what I was going to say, and like you could probably talk about it for hours.
Yeah, we could. But I think going back to the original point of that tangent, I think the data-driven approach, it's something which, like you said, a lot of people are trying to implement. Maybe not many are being successful with it. If you go back to the pioneers of that in English football, it was Brentford. Everyone called, I forget the name of the owner who tried it and it worked and he's perfected it. Everyone said it won't work. What are you doing? Prove them all wrong. People now can't replicate that model they've used because it's public knowledge, if that makes sense. It's sort of like, I know we didn't have a data-driven approach, but when Swans originally got promoted to the Premier League, that was a new way of doing things. Everyone replicated it. That's ancient history now. We're never going to get back to what that was. So you got to, I think the issue is, but if you're trying to copy what clubs like Brentford have done, you're probably not going to get very far. You got to maybe do things differently. What differently is, that isn't my job. I know it's easy to say. But
yeah. I don't want to go into detail about it now, but I think this is a good topic for maybe one of the off-season podcasts we can do in the summer, because it probably should wrap up in a minute. But I think it's maybe still a bit too early to completely say that it hasn't worked with a data-driven approach. Easy to say now we're kind of settled in the league this season and we can go again. Maybe it didn't work the best this year, but we also had several players that have come through good, and especially January. Like I know we haven't seen much of the Arsenal youngster that came in. I think he was really only brought in as a bit of cover, though, wasn't he? This in reality, that's what that was. But the other two wingers, Ronald and Placheta, you've got to say,
yeah,
I know Placheta's injury has made it a little bit more frustrating, but you've got to say that's two good examples. And by all accounts, Ronald wasn't top choice, but surely if he's not top choice, he's come in and done so good. That's a good sign.
Ronald is the one that gives you hope for the summer. I think if you look at the season as a whole, how many signings were a hit? Rushworth.
We went through this actually the other day.
Yeah.
It was probably a 50-50. And out of the 50 that aren't a hit, I don't think it's as clear-cut to say not a hit, because you've got the likes of Charlie Patino in there. And if you had said at Christmas, or at least in Michael Duff's time here, he was a hit then, he's only not a hit now because managers don't play him. Now, it's funny because if you asked the fan base when he originally got dropped, should he get dropped, they all went nuts. No, he shouldn't get dropped. Now he's been dropped and hasn't come back on. All of a sudden, they all agree with Luke Williams. But like, they weren't agreeing with him when Michael Duff and Sheehan first dropped him. Now they like the manager. They think it's a good decision. So like, there's a bit of like your opinion is swayed by a connection with your boss a little bit as well. I think it's going on with Patino. We called him out from the start of the season. Not said he was a bad player, but said he was inconsistent and costing the team. He then got dropped, or at least he wasn't playing like he would usually get dropped midweek, I think it was. And fans were going nuts about it. But now if you look at the review, a lot of fans will say he's been a flop. So I do find that a bit of an interesting one, because a lot of fans clamoured so much for him to be starting every game.
Well, yeah, I think I was about to touch on just then, Patino way back when we were on a losing streak, and then Duff had a few wins in a row. I think one thing I said, which probably didn't go down too well at the time because he was playing decent, was him and Grimes and double pivot doesn't work because of Patino's work off the ball. Since then, it looks like that was a pretty early.
No, that's the issue,
because
his work off the ball is bad.
It's that, yeah, that's how it's transpired. Yeah, I mean, I think if you look at the signings as a whole, Timon obviously brilliant. Key when he's been fit, good. Ronald,
I think take the injuries out of it, because you can't really say you can't foresee the injuries. You know, even with like Gianelli, I would still say Gianelli's a positive signing.
Yeah, he's still a positive sign. Low, I think, fine overall. And then
he's contributed a lot to the season ultimately, isn't he? If we didn't have him, we'd be a bit stuck.
Yeah, Rushworth, brilliant, like we say, and then you move on, and then you have a few duds, and then you have Patino, Charles Sago Jr., which, you know, bit of an odd one. Yates, no. Kuharevich, no, and I wanted him to get some opportunity,
same.
but it never
See,
happened, did it?
I would say that's fair for him because he's barely kicked a ball. Yates has a no when he scored 8 goals. I think he needs at least be in like a mid category. I don't think he can go in the same category as Kuherovic, especially considering the fees were too.
If we're saying purely yes or no, I think he has to go in the same category as Kuherovic. And the other thing I'd say is goals, assists are important, but you watch every single game and you just see he isn't contributing to a successful team performance. That's the issue with Jerry. But yeah, could be a lot of turnover in the summer. I think the thing that's concerning me, if we go back to the accounts, is the £3 million a month that's been injected by the owners. And you can't blame them for doing it. Obviously, it's necessary, but is it sustainable? I don't know. Like, what's happening is every month the owners are injecting £3 million into the club. That's then being converted into shares. And what's happening is they're the majority owners. There's also minority owners who own a lesser stake in the club, and their shares are becoming diluted, meaning the owners are putting £3 million a month in. They're essentially taking, in simple terms, they're taking some of the shares off the minority holders and adding it to their own.
Is it £3 million a month?
A month.
Where is that? I'll have to look into it.
If you go on Swans Twitter and type in £3 million in the search bar, I imagine it would come up.
That's crazy. I need to know context behind that.
If you go at Swans Official, let me try typing in just number 3. I don't know. Maybe that hasn't worked. I don't know.
I'll investigate, but like that's crazy if that is the case.
Whether it's every single month without fail, I'm not sure, but it's regularly. And that's an insane amount of money.
Is that allowed under like FFP? Like I don't understand.
Yeah, I think. I still don't think we can have losses, can we? But it's covering the losses. Like it's not as simple as, okay, we've lost 20 mil. Like someone's got to pay for the 20 mil, haven't they?
Yeah, no, they do. But I just mean like, I thought you just couldn't pump your own money in to a certain extent.
You can pump money in, you just can't lose too much money, I think.
I've just typed in Swansea City FC 3 million, and the first tweet that's come up is Danny Graham, why Swansea City? And Watford FC, why 3.5 million? Sounds like the deal was done too quick. Going back to 2011, back when the days were a little bit more rosy.
So if you just type in Swansea City cash injection, 22nd of Feb, there's one up, new shares issued.
I know, but obviously the cash injections where they're saying they've done more shares and stuff. I don't remember seeing them like monthly. I think they've done them like at least once or twice a year for the last couple of years.
This one in February is July, November, then February. I seem to remember one more recently than that again.
Oh, but they've only announced it in that one.
I don't know.
We're
and take everything we're saying with a pinch of salt, because we're relying off memory here as well, as we're not experts in this at all. But
like we've just read the information. We're talking about our opinion. We are not experts, and hopefully we'll do a little bit more digging. Maybe we'll talk a bit more detail with a little bit more actual fact in the summer. But what we read out from the statement, what I read out earlier, is fact. We are just chatting, like a little bit of concern about the sitch, but we want to find out a little bit more about the situation. I want to find out, as I said, compare against other clubs in the Championship. Are they in a similar boat? Are we on our own? Are we doing worse or better? Is this something that we should be a little bit more worried about? And then hopefully we can discuss that at more length after I get that. I don't think all of the clubs have announced their accounts yet, so I'm going to do some digging. Because I know historically I've seen like Stoke City usually are not great when it comes to this sort of thing, because we've questioned it in the past how they get away with it, I guess, and how the fact that they came down with us and they pumped money in and it clearly shows they haven't worked. Now they're in a situation where they got no money and they're struggling in the league. There's a couple of clubs that fall into that category, but the bottom line is I just want to find out, is this a Swansea City issue, or are we part of a football bubble that's about to burst and holding on same as everyone else? That's kind of the question. Everything else, we're kind of looking at the information with a bit of opinion. I want that extra added context to be able to form my opinion correctly, I guess, because it's easy to jump on a fee of, well, a figure of 17.9 million and really worry and think the worst. I'm sure Cardiff had a massive loss like last year as well,
they're
didn't they?
trying to sue Nantes, saying,
Yeah, I've seen that's mad.
which is ridiculous. I just have to chuck that one in there. Absolutely ridiculous.
I mean,
I know it's not
it's a
how
bit
the world works.
distasteful,
From
isn't it?
an ethical point of view, let the family just live their life. Like,
When is that case just going to be closed? Like move on from what was a tragic situation, and it's just sad how it all boils down to money.
And
Ultimately,
even if you take the ethical point of view away from it, like for anyone who doesn't realize, basically, go back to the Emiliano Sala case. If in case people forgot, it's the one where he tragically lost his life on the transport route from France to the UK over the Channel in the plane crash. But basically, they're trying to sue his former club, saying they pulled data up, which proves that based on the amount
I
of
can't believe
goals,
it.
based on the amount of goals Emiliano Sala was scoring in France, he would have been projected to score X amount of goals for Cardiff, giving them a 54% chance of staying in the Premier League, meaning because they were likely going to stay in the Premier League based off these statistics they've estimated, they should be owed the amount of money that they would have had for staying in the Premier League. So they're trying to hand Nance an invoice for £100 million or so. Not only is it distasteful, it's absolutely outrageous to even think.
So the 100 million comes from the amount of money they would have lost by getting relegated instead of staying in the league.
Presumably, if
I
you
think
take the
that's
parachute payments,
I think
maybe.
finishing 17th would have been worth 100 million, essentially, is what they're trying to say. And they believe that his goals would have meant they would have got over that line because they only missed out just about. I can't remember the exact figure they went down by.
Well, for the sake of it,
it was quite close. I believe it was like one win, maybe. But
was it 2018-19, I want to say.
I don't understand how you can ever win a case on what ifs in the way that is presented. 2 points. But the problem is, if I'm correct in saying this, again, pinch of salt, go do your own research on this if you are interested, on a situation, if you're interested, because it is an interesting topic, distasteful in my opinion, and a bit sad. But, it's going to go, if it goes into courts, it will be there for as a historic case, I guess. But I believe in France, or at least in the French court that they're using, because they're going to French court for this, that court does actually do outcomes based on probability a little bit more than like law and fact.
I can just
and that's why they're trying it. So they must have obviously had legal advice to get to this point where they think it's worth going ahead.
This is what's nuts. They wouldn't be doing it unless they think it's a fairly decent chance of getting something, even if it's like a settlement payment. But
yeah,
the reason this is just nuts, obviously, again, whilst they're important, ignore the ethical issues for a second, if you can. They're choosing to sue them in France. Not a lawyer, right? I don't know how French court works. But if they can sue them in France, it doesn't that mean that Nance can counter-sue them, or not counter-sue them, but appeal in the UK? Like,
it's just messy, isn't it?
It's just going to drag, is what I'm saying. It's going to get to the point where it's going to be like the 10-year anniversary when this event occurred, and they're still bickering about, oh, how much can I sue you for? Because this man died on the plane. It's like, I get wound up about it, because you see it pop up on Twitter, you don't know what's a wind-up and what's truth sometimes as well. It's just shockingly bad. It's vile.
They obviously, I mean, they obviously they're desperate for the money, I would imagine, which is why they're pursuing it so heavily. But
keep in mind that they're pulling off this, or trying to do this lawsuit after they were getting transfer embargoes imposed upon them because they were refusing to pay the transfer fee, which they were legally obliged by FIFA to pay. Like they've just when you think they can't sink any lower, they just keep finding a way. And I'd like to think, I know it's the bias of all their rivals. That's why we know about it, because it pops up more. Because you see Cardiff news more than you see like another club.
I think that's football news, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But like, I'd like to think even if you take the Swansea bias out of it, it's still a disgusting thing to have to like look at and read. You know what I mean? Sorry to end on a bitter and depressing note.
I mean,
After an
this is
hour
what I mean, though. We
45,
weren't
but
expected to talk about that, but sometimes when
no,
you're just rambling on, you just go
yeah,
off on tangents, and hopefully there's still people listening anyway. But I mean, yeah, I see what comes of it. I don't think it's the last we're going to hear of it anyway. So, but business be business, and people with money do money things,
yeah.
I guess. Would we, here's the question, maybe to end on, would our owners be different before
No,
we take the moral high ground?
I think we can take the moral high ground of saying we wouldn't do that. Would our owners not do that? I think we probably know they would. If you hypothetical, of course, not saying otherwise. If God forbid we're even in that position because it was a freakish act of nature. Hopefully, it doesn't happen to any football club again or person. But yeah, we're not the nicest club to deal with, as we know.
No.
So
Yeah, so on that note, we'll end it. And just want to say thank you to Ben for coming. And it's been a bit of a long chat this evening, so I hope it haven't drained you too much. Obviously, we've watched the sunset in the background of your scene, and I think when we started, it was a little bit lighter, and you can definitely see it's dark now. So
yeah, that's true.
but yeah, it's been good chatting to you. Hopefully, we'll be back soon, and we'll obviously do one when the season closes to review the season and all the rest of it as well. So I don't know if that'll be next week or a week after. I'll be honest and say it probably depends how my move goes, because obviously transferring internet and stuff be a bit of a problem if there's no internet for when it comes to recorded stuff. So just know that there will be something coming ASAP. But thanks to everyone for watching and listening. If you are on Spotify, as always, don't forget to subscribe and get involved in the comments about everything we discussed today. I'm sure there's some bad takes you all disagree with, or if you agree with us, let us know as well. It's all opinion, and we all like to hear what everyone thinks, obviously in a nice and peaceful way. But yeah, on that note, we shall catch you in the next one. And yeah, hopefully end on a win next week against Millwall.